Okay. Alright, sorry about that. I had an issue with the internet and chose a grand time to give me a hard time. So, where was I? Talking about this police officer who tried to come over and tell us to move, and I basically asked him why. And he didn't have an answer, and they never do. They never have any factual evidence to support their claim that they have authority over any of us. So, to be an effective cop watcher, I really think it's important to ask them these sorts of questions, in the field even, as long as we stay safe. Obviously they have the guns, obviously they are willing to use the violence sometimes, so I don't advocate pushing the limits when there's a threat of violence on the table and it looks pretty clear like they're going to act on it. But what I do recommend is, if you're a cop watcher and you get arrested, don't take their plea deals. Don't allow them to give you their lawyers. Don't give any credibility to their system, because right now, as it stands, there's a group of people, yeah, I got detained at Oxnard, or they called it a detention. They determined that it was an unlawful detention, but I contend that it was a assault and battery, false imprisonment, because they never had the authority to force me to be in a space. They never had, the authority to grab my arm and take hold. So, but what I'm seeing is a lot of cop watchers are sort of helping them. And they're helping them by getting arrested, having charges filed against them, and then entering guilty pleas, or allowing themselves to be represented by lawyers, and whether they win or lose, they're still giving the system itself credibility, where the system itself does not have credibility at all. My hearings most of them are out there on Joe's channel in Hawaii, Joe in Hawaii's channel, and you can hear me asking questions of the judge, and the basis of that is, they always say that we have the right to be informed of the cause and nature of the accusations and proceedings. Okay? So they say that we have that right before we are ever arraigned. So when we are at an arraignment hearing and we just enter a plea of not guilty, then we're really helping them out. Arrested for flipping off a cop? Wow. I actually, I tend to flip off cops because I think they need to be reminded that their presence is unwelcome. I've never been arrested for it, but wow. But I'm just worried that a lot of cop watchers still believe that the Constitution is a document that is powerful, and that there is still some credibility to the legal system that they use against us. I believe that a lot of cop watchers think that words that are spoken in legalese actually matter, or they may not even understand that these words are spoken in legalese and it's a completely different language. And this worries me, because if you are still holding on to a belief in the Constitution, city ordinance. See, and that's the thing. It's a city ordinance, all right? There's no injury. Like, so you're in a city where they wrote an ordinance that says, "Thou shalt not flip off police officers," and you flip off a police officer. What factual evidence is there that shows that you have any obligation to follow that ordinance at all. There is none. There's no obligation there. Just because they're willing to use violence against you, that's not evidence of your obligation. That's evidence that these people are willing to commit crimes against an innocent person. Part of the elements of the so-called crimes, which are actually policy violations, which is why they're called police officers, because they're not actually like enforcing laws or anything. They're not actually protecting anybody. They're catching people and extorting them based upon policy violations. But there exists no obligation for any of us to follow any of those policies, unless somebody wants to come up and show me evidence that shows that that ordinance, that code, that statute is applicable to me. And you, police officer, have to have personal first-hand knowledge that this code is applicable to me. And if you don't, then you stopping me and threatening me is a crime. Like Admiralty law. Like the whole Admiralty law thing, though, is still part of the voodoo. It's still like, okay, so what factual evidence is there that would show that, you know, I have any obligation to follow any of the, whatever the Admiralty law says, that I have any obligation to follow that? There is none. So the so-called laws, the statutes, the legal system, it all exists in the minds of a group of people. It exists in the collective imagination of the minds of a group of people who try to use that against us, because they've taught us ever since we were kids that, oh, well, police officers are here to protect you and they're here to enforce laws, and so anytime you see a police officer and he tells you what to do, yeah, you have to obey. Just do what he says, because that's the easiest thing. And if the police officer is in the wrong, then you can always go to court and hash that out. It's like, well, what about those people that don't get to go to court because the police officers kill them in the field because they just assumed that they had jurisdiction over this individual, absent any factual evidence that there was jurisdiction, and they murder the innocent person, and nobody holds them responsible? Like, they may get suspended without pay pending investigation, and then, 3 months later they're back. So I advocate an end. I advocate a sort of a peaceful and Socratic resistance to them. Now, good night, time to stand. Hopefully we'll talk. Yeah, I would like to go out with you and cop watch sometime. That would be cool. But what is happening is, if cop watchers are going to court and taking the plea deals and all of that, then they are helping the system by creating more money within it. And, whatever, like, I know some of the cop watchers in Portland, and it's really hard for me to sit through their hearings because I hear the lawyers screwing them over. I hear the judge allowing their lawyers to screw them over. And I see all of the lawyers and judges working together against these people. And I just want to shout out, like, this is ridiculous. You guys can't do this to this person. But yeah, and then they end up in jail, or they end up, having these restrictions placed on them where they can't even go out and record police anymore. And that's frustrating for me, because I recognize that there are a small number of people who get it, who get that the system exists only in the imagination of these mafia-esque type people who try to rule over us, and most people still are trying to hold on to something, and really, a lot of them are still trying to hold on to the Constitution. And what a lot of people don't know is, because of the even if you looked at it from that perspective, where let's say the Constitution was legitimate somehow. I mean, you're free to try to prove to me how, but I have yet to see any evidence. But let's say it was, then the Constitution was suspended as soon as the War on Terror was announced. So the War on Terror, as long as it is going on, as long as it is officially going on, then the U.S. is in a situation where the Constitution is not being upheld by anyone. So all of these people who supposedly, probably before that, I'm sure there was another war that they had to create, right? So anybody who's saying, like, anybody who's talking to these people about breaking their oath, they're actually wrong about that, because these people who swore an oath to the Constitution currently have no obligation to uphold it because of whatever constitutional rationalization they use to suspend the Constitution in times of war. So really, we need to get this out of our heads, and I'm sorry if it offends some people that I'm saying that, this 250-year-old document has no validity at all. But ask yourself, what evidence exists that shows that it would? It's not a binding contract. Nobody is alive today who signed it. We can't force our children to enter into contracts. Like I can't say, well, I'm agreeing to this contract for my son. That's ludicrous to think that could ever be done. Don't forget about Jan. Hey, Joe. How you doing, man? So I'm just trying to help educate people on how to more effectively cop watch, how to ask Socratic questions, how to hold these criminals to their burden of proof, because unless they have personal first-hand knowledge that would show that they have the legitimate authority somehow to force you to do something, then they're nothing short of being criminals. They're committing crimes. And really, that's when we have the right to defend ourselves against them, right? Like, if we're being attacked by somebody and they're trying to force us and they're using weapons to try to scare us, then we have the right to defend ourselves in whatever form that takes. And so I'm just putting it out there for cop watchers who may believe in the Constitution, and I am begging you guys, if you still are going up to the police officers and saying, well, I have this First Amendment right, or I have this Second Amendment right, or I have this, then you're trying to claim rights. And you are trying to claim that the Constitution is a valid document that applies to you. And the moment you do that, then they look at that as evidence of jurisdiction. And it's that simple. That's how they view it. This person who is out here in the field pointing a camera at us is declaring that he has Second Amendment rights. Therefore, I have the right to give him a lawful order and force him to comply. So that's something that I would like to see stop. No, that's wrong. What's wrong? John says, no, that's wrong. So, and I'm perfectly willing to entertain any ideas that people think that the Constitution maybe does apply, or that maybe they do have evidence of jurisdiction. Too much to type, yeah, of course. But, like, at least if you're going to offer something, then be willing to be held accountable for your words. Be willing to be challenged. Because if it can be demonstrated that you are using irrational thought, yeah, you're wrong, but I won't say why. Yep. If it can be demonstrated that you're using irrational thought or not logic or no facts, then you're really going to have to consider the idea that you may be wrong. You're going to have to, Judge Udovic, was that who that was, maybe? But a lot of people just want to be right. A lot of people just want everyone else to know that they are right, and they're more interested in being seen as right than actually being correct or having correct information. So, I have never seen any factual evidence that shows the Constitution applies to anyone. It's not a valid contract. It's not signed by anybody alive today. The so-called group called We the People, I have never seen that this actually exists. And even if it does, then that would be a group of people that I never agreed to be a part of. They never came to me and said, hey, you want to be part of We the People? King 9, how are you? So, given all of that, ask yourself, if you are still believing, guns apply the Constitution. If you're still believing that the Constitution applies and that police have legitimate authority to try to order you to do things, then, or to order you to do things, I guess, then ask yourself why. What are you holding on to? What facts are you relying upon to believe that? And cops are just gang members, and that's really what I'm trying to show you is until you really go down the rabbit hole and you see, like, we can understand on this level. Hold on one second. It's all about consent. Like when you get a driver's license, it's a contract that takes away your constitutional and gives you privilege. The thing about the driver's license is, so if you didn't have a driver's license, does that mean the code wouldn't apply to you? Also, getting a driver's license is about the only way that you can safely travel on the roads without without a reasonable expectation of violence being committed against you. So any driver's license that you get is done under duress, and where duress is present, consent cannot be given. So yeah, I feel like we need to all be working together more. I feel like we all need to be combining our efforts because we're all really good at different things. But as long as they keep us separated, then we're toast. Like, they will be able to pick us off one by one. I see them sending people to jail. I see these people being sent to jail, and they're not being very effective in court, and that's rather unfortunate. And they keep 8 quarter. Nice. That's good. Well, yeah, because they can never arraign you. They're never able to actually arraign you in the sense that arraignment is the entering of a plea. It's basically saying guilty, not guilty, but it has to be an informed plea. And there are so many things that would go into entering an informed plea, being informed of the cause and nature of the accusations and proceedings, that they could never adequately inform you. They could never give you enough information. And so, part of that information that you should have, is, what factual evidence, or is the prosecution even alleging that there exists any factual evidence at all that would show that I have an obligation to follow this code, that this code is applicable to me? And they're never able to say, oh yes, it's right here, and point it to you. They never show it to you at trial. Yeah. And that's the thing, is they're looking for you to plea. They're looking for your voluntary plea to happen, and that's what they want. So even if they enter one for you, a plea was never entered. because only you can enter a plea. Only you can enter an informed plea. If you hire a lawyer, then you're basically saying, well, now this lawyer can enter a plea for me, and since the lawyer works for the state, yeah, I mean, in a way you've consented to their jurisdiction, but you actually haven't, because duress is still present. And you can't really consent to their jurisdiction without being fully informed. So if they have never given you the information that would show that you have been informed of the cause and nature of the accusations and proceedings, and you still have these questions, then they have no right to arraign you. So if you're presumed innocent, then what factual evidence exists that shows that I am guilty of this single element called jurisdiction? Not just, I was physically located somewhere. Oh, Kachita says, terrible advice you are giving to people. You have like 3 videos and they all suck. So if you are able to point to this so-called terrible advice, I am completely willing to hear it, but you know, I doubt that you can. Yeah, and that's the thing, is lawyers lie to you in order to get you to enter a guilty plea. That's ultimately what they do. I was talking to somebody who was pulled over by a sheriff and told that his breath smelled like beer, and this sheriff made him come out and face his strobing lights, even though this guy told him that he has a seizure disorder, that the strobing lights will probably activate. So he ends up having a seizure. They end up holding him in the car for an hour and 45 minutes, and then they charge him with felonies and misdemeanors. So he hires lawyers who have only been taking his money. I just need to learn more. All right. Well, if you think that I need to learn more, then I would love to hear what else I could learn about this anyway. But yeah, so they take this guy and charge him with crimes. He hires lawyers, and his lawyers are doing nothing but taking money from him and postponing it, and then trying to get him to plead guilty. And he's giving these lawyers like $3,000. He's sovereignty, common law. Well, yeah, sovereignty, common law. I mean, it's all a code that exists in the imagination of a group of people. So if there's somebody who's born that code doesn't exist in their imagination, then it would be wrong to try to force those opinions upon that person and try to force them to follow these rules that they never agreed to. You have to be able to show some facts that show that this, whatever you want to call it, whether it's admiralty law, common law, you know, city ordinance law number 97, yeah, and I don't really want to know like all of the things about common law. I mean, I get their rationalizations for why we do things or why they do things to us. I understand the name game. I understand that they created a legal fiction straw man thing that, you know, then they created all these trust accounts with millions of dollars with our names on them that they don't allow us to access. But all these things I'm aware of. But yeah, I'm all over the place. How would you be able to make that half-baked cop understand all this shit? Yeah, well, the thing that people have to understand about cops is they've been trained, and they may not understand all of this, but they have been trained to get confessions out of you. So say you're pulled over and the cop asks you, is this your vehicle? If you say either yes or if you say no, then in their eyes, you've just confessed that they have jurisdiction over you. Because when they used the word vehicle, they were speaking legalese. Vehicle did not mean car, like you thought it did when you answered the question. vehicle meant a thing being used for commercial purposes, or whatever the statute of that area says that vehicle means. So saying, yes, this is my vehicle, you thought you were just saying, well, yes, I own this car, but you were also agreeing that this is a vehicle. If you say no, then you're also they look at it as you're also agreeing that it's a vehicle, but it's simply not yours. So they'll hear the answer to the question how they want in order to get a confession, and that's what their training teaches them to do. Whether or not they understand it or not, yes, exactly, they try to get you to self-incriminate. So I always like to turn it around, and like if a cop asked me, is this your vehicle, I would say, are you making a legal determination that this is in fact a vehicle? And if so, what factual evidence would support your claim? What personal first-hand knowledge do you have that would support your claim that this is a vehicle? And they're just going to go, they're not going to be able to answer the question. And they're not going to understand, they may not even understand why you're asking them that. But they do know that their training just said that they did not get what they needed. So it's likely to... He ain't playing those games. Yeah, cops don't like to be held accountable for their words, but if there was ever a point where they were basically saying, or the cop was getting mad, then I would ask for a supervisor immediately and proceed from there, but I'm never going to give them confessions. And I'm going to tell you, I watch a lot of videos of people recording police, and I almost always hear the people incriminate themselves. And once these people incriminate, I don't know. I mean, court, Anyway, once these people incriminate themselves, then that is when violence is typically used against them. I have seen cops being completely reasonable with people until a moment where a person makes the mistake of incriminating themselves, and then all of a sudden they're pulled out of their car and beaten and taken to jail. And so that's what I would like people to learn more about, so that they don't keep making these mistakes over and over again. Because by self-incriminating, or by incriminating yourself and allowing yourself to go through the court process and allowing them to arraign you and allowing them to give you lawyers and then entering a guilty plea and allowing them to place conditions upon your life, is only helping them. It's not actually helping our cause. It makes it so that cop watchers become more like people who are trying to fight against this authority, and trying to stand up to it, but they're never actually saying, wait a minute, you don't have authority over me, or asking them what factual evidence would show that you do have authority. Can always respond to questions with clarification questions to avoid incrimination, delay, call pretend lawyer, record it. Yeah, these are good tactics to protect yourself. But you have to get it out of your heads. And I mean, I tried to write to like the Batasai, and I tried to explain it to Mike Bluehair and Bob and all these people in Portland that you can't allow them to, you can't claim constitutional rights, because that is going to get you in trouble. And that's what I'm trying to show here or explain here. So if anybody has any questions about this or anything at all, then at least be willing to examine the questions that I ask of you. Be able to examine your own long-held beliefs, the truths that may be uncomfortable to you, and because it's highly likely that your mind will change if you are only open to actually listening to what, I say or I ask you, or people like me ask you, because there's not very many of us, and I would like to see more of us become knowledgeable about what our freedom actually means, how free we really are, because that is the path to, basically living a rich lifestyle. I see the entire process as illegal. It went away. Oh, shit. I see the entire process as a legal abuse syndrome that they can begin at any moment, rather than why not benefit from a weak position. Well, and that's the thing is, when there's a cop basically threatening us or talking to us or whatever, then we are in a weak position because they have a gun. And if we are constantly pointing out the fact, well, you're the criminal with the gun here, like, unless you can show me some personal first-hand knowledge that shows you have factual evidence of authority over me, then you're committing a crime against me. And right now I'm a victim. And reminding them of that, informing them of that, letting them know, hey, you're committing a crime right now, is extremely important to being able to criminally prosecute them in the future. I am thinking of a decentralized criminal prosecution system that could be done using blockchain technology, an app on the phone that would provide jobs. Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a weak position. It's more like just you're claiming something over me. You're making a claim, and I just want you to prove it. And if you can't prove it using logic and facts, then you're just being irrational, and you happen to have a gun. So, looks to me like you're the one committing the crime, sir. And that's really where we need to get to, because once because we have the right, or to say we have the right, it is right for us to criminally prosecute someone who commits violence against us. The courts were originally set up so that we could go there and say, this guy did this to me, and we could criminally prosecute them. But the courts were hijacked by, the oligarchs who created these legal fictions that call themselves the state of X or whatever. But all they are is a criminal faction, and they have no legitimate control, but they're using your education against you. They're using false dichotomies against you. They're teaching you all sorts of bullshit. What do you say when he claims I'm disobeying a lawful order to get out of the car? So if he's not threatening you with violence, then I would say, what factual evidence exists that shows that I have any obligation to obey any of your so-called lawful orders? Do you have personal first-hand knowledge of those facts? Yes or no? And I honestly don't know how he'll respond. I was, yeah, Robbie, but you have a way to say it in such a way that a 5-year-old can understand. Oh, well, that's what I mean by weak, not weak. I see. Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, kids do understand this. I talk to kids about this, and they're like, yeah, you're right. And so I know these are future people who, when they turn 18 and the cops say, yeah, you could say, I want to see a supervisor too. But I would probably do that after he starts to, oh, yeah, there you go. May I call my lawyer before complying, or are you going to torture me with your weapons? Yeah. Shoot, I lost my train of thought, but, hey, Angelo. Oh, wow. Angelo, I think, just recently got out of jail. And I don't know much about his story at this point, but I know that he was challenging them in court, and he sounds like he's home now. That's good. I'm gonna want to be listening to his story, but yeah, it's going on a long time now, and I've been sort of rambling a bit, but I hope that you guys can hear what I'm saying and that it is getting through, because if we keep on talking about the Constitution and how that is supposed to be protecting us, then we're just being compliant cattle. And that's the thing about this whole thing that I think that a lot of people don't actually realize is, have I had a lot of police interaction? Yeah, I have, actually. I feel like I have, especially this past couple of years. I talk to them all the time, and I go up and I flip them off and ask them questions and challenge them, and they usually run away. They always think that, well, I can engage this guy because I'll just embarrass him, but I end up embarrassing them because they can never answer my questions. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that slavery is alive and well. You know, slavery that was supposedly abolished is not actually abolished. It has been changed to be that we are in a situation where we basically live on a giant plantation, and we are considered cattle by them. There is a ruling class of people, a small group of people, who rule over us, or try to rule over us, or are claiming rulership over us. But that's not right. So slavery is still wrong, no matter what you call it. And honestly, the Constitution basically helped slavery to continue to exist, even after it was supposedly abolished. And I could talk for hours and hours and go into great depth about just the nature of the ruling class and how they believe that they rule over us, and you know, what it is that they do in certain locations against us to you know, run social experiments and just control us like ranchers would control cattle. But you have to start with the basic understanding that that is the nature of things. And they say we're free, but you can look around and look at all sorts of ways that you are not free. And so the fact of the matter is we are free. All we have to do is fight for our freedom. And we have to stand up to these people who are trying to claim that they have the right to enslave us, because they don't. And the cops are slaves just like we are, but they get paid, and you know, they basically feed off the tit of the state, and you know, that's how they live. They're, you know, they're the true people on welfare, because they rely upon the extortion of others, the extortion of innocent people, in order to feed their families. And that's wrong. There is a way more ethical way to do it. There are, if people started to stand up and understand, that nobody has the right to enslave them, then people would be able to have the freedom to do the things that they want to do, to, for example, to make money, make resources, you know, increase their standard of living, not constantly being stolen from or robbed by these criminals that call themselves the state. But you first have to get it out of your mind that police are good, because police are not. I believe that some of the people might try to be good or believe that they're good, but the situational factors that situational factors that they find themselves in cause them to take on a role that causes them to do evil things in the name of good. and that's something that we have to stop enabling, because if we're still supporting the idea that police have the right to police us, then we're losing. We're allowing humans to enslave us, and that's unacceptable. So I'm probably going to shut this off because it's been like 40 minutes and I'm probably boring everybody. But so have a good night, and thank you all for watching. Bye.